on our website so that others can review it in the future. Here we want to just give you a quick opportunity for an introduction to the Part B Rural County Grant Program, and also conduct a Q&A. So we'll go ahead and get started. We are at the top of the hour, so we'll do that. Sharing my screen. Hopefully everybody can see the PowerPoint. Anybody willing to give me a thumbs up there? That'd be awesome. The Rural County Grant Part B is a second part, obviously, of the Rural County Grant that was introduced to us through SB 95. We were not able to launch Part B last year as a result of COVID and with the cutbacks in the budgets to Part A as well. So we're looking forward to the launch of Part B. So I'm going to give you a rundown of the basics of Part B and then introduce the method through which you will go to log into the application. And then we'll have a Q&A. So the Part B grant is a competitive award, and it is obtained obviously by competitive application. That means everybody will be going after the same pool of funds. This funding exceeds the $200,000 Part A annual distribution that all of the rural counties have already received. And the rural county, a rural county may receive up to $100,000. So total available funds this year is $1.75 million. An application must come from a qualified rural county. The county may not request more than $600,000. And the application must include a description of anticipated economic development projects and activities approved by the legislative body, that's your councils and commissions, based upon the recommendation of your county economic development board. And then it must address the economic development needs of a county, which may include business recruitment, development, expansion, workforce training and development, and infrastructure and capital facilities improvements for business development. The basic elements of the application will be a scope of work, project and activities budget, and then deliverables and outcomes that would also include a timeline. So I'm going to ask that you become very, very familiar with the information and instruction document that can be found on the website. It'll give you a thorough lesson and instruction on what you can expect in the application, what you need to prepare for as you get into the application. And I'll show you where to find that. What happens after an application is submitted? An application will be reviewed and scored by a Go Utah Board subcommittee. That application must score at least a 75 or greater to be considered for an award. Each application will be scored based on the following. And if you take a look at this short list here, this essentially will be your scope of work, okay? So the quality of the application will be considered, the economic development projects and activities description, and the purposes, goals, and measurable outcomes related to improving the overall county economy, and then the justified economic development need and the dollar amount requested. So I'm going to stop sharing, but we'll come back to this and talk a little bit more in a more of a Q&A session. But I'm going to stop sharing for a second and then reshare another page with you. So let me get to that.
I asked a question in the chat. Never done this before. I'm in Goshen. Is that a rural county, Utah County?
Let me finish this presentation. We'll come back to your questions. Okay, so you should see now the Go Utah website, business.utah.gov. And I want to make sure that you know how to access your application. So you would go into business services. I'm just going to walk you through it. Go into the Center for Rural Development and scroll down to the program, which is the Rural County Grant Program. There you'll find a few links. The announcement that obviously announced this meeting today and the opening of the grant process. Here is the information and instruction sheet that you will want to open in the link and probably copy down so that you can see the whole thing. It's not populating very fast, but here it comes. Everything you need to know in preparation for your application should be here in this, essentially it's a program guide. This is strictly not part A. This is only concentrated on part B here. So anything that you need to know should be here. However, of course, we are available for questions. And you have a link to apply. Now, to be very clear, those who have never applied for the Part A grant or never submitted a report from Part A from last year, your annual report, won't have access to this portal. Only those that have already done this will be able to do this again for Part B. Otherwise, we would have to arrange new accesses for new users. And while it's possible, we anticipate that likely the same applicants for Part A will be the same applicants for Part B. So you'd hit the update button. And once you hit the update button, you will find My Applications. And right at the top, it should be the one newest to you, which is Rural County Grant Part B, fiscal year 2022. And if you go over here to the It's link, you can open up that link and then you will want to hit the edit button. And then you're in the application. So let's just walk through this. Here's some general instructions, probably less than we've already given you, but also a reference here to this link here, back to that program guide, back to the information and instructions. That's the first part, and then you can go to next, which is going to take you down to the next tab. Technically, you can hit next, or you can just hit the next tab down. We'll hit next. And it will begin to ask you your organizational information, county, street address, contact information, primary contacts, secondary contacts, and so forth, their titles, their emails, their contact information here. So that's essentially your first informational tab. Next and you'd want to save that information, hit next. And here we are asking for some supporting documentation. Two things. Number one, a letter of support from your County Economic Development Advisory Board. In other words, and that should say county, not community. We'll change that. But essentially what we're looking for here is proof that your County Economic Board is active and involved in the economic development planning. So we're requesting a letter of support from them for this proposal. And then we'll, of course, need your W-9 form and or state vendor number. That's how you would get paid. And essentially all we need to do is choose a file. Once you've chosen a file, in other words, your county economic development advisory board letter of support and a W-9, and then you would upload that. Save that information and go on to the next. The next part is the scope of work. And here in the scope of work, you have an open question, but we've asked you, we've given you some prompting questions here or fields, in other words, or questions. 1, 2, and 3, 4 are to help prompt your thinking and or how to answer the question. That's what we're coming down to, okay? So you've got plenty of room in this box to answer the question for the scope of work, okay? The details of your projects and activities, what's going to be done, when will it be completed, how will it be completed, who are your partners, what are some of your goals, benchmarks, and so forth. So this will be your big time report that says this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. I would highly advise that you prepare this outside of this box and not use this as an edit field. I would write this proposal in a Word document, and once you're satisfied with it, copy it and paste it into here. Do your minor edits in this box, but not your major edits, and then save it and go on to the next. The next section is deliverables and outcomes. Again, some prompting questions or suggestions. We want you to pay particular attention to metrics. What are you going to deliver? How are you going to measure it? Who's going to do the measuring and tracking and so forth? How do we know when you hit your benchmarks and goals? And are you affecting these 3 areas that are a part of the county grant? Business recruiting, development, expansion, workforce training, development, and or infrastructure capital facilities for business development. Okay, and then we will ask you also to tell us what your time frame is. To be clear, those who are awarded Part B grant funds will enter into a contract with us. So you know that in your Part A grant, we did not enter into a contract per se. It became essentially, once you've done your reporting and met the CED board requirements and so forth, your annual reporting and your application, then the funds came directly to you. In this case, it has an element of post-performance, and so we will enter into a contract. That contract will be for 2 years. In other words, you'll have 2 years from the time we've got signed documents and contracts to perform your proposed effort. Now, it may only take you 6 months. It might take you only 3 months. However, the contract will be for 2 years. And once you complete it, then you'll call for reimbursement. And we will reimburse you. Well, let me step back a little bit, tell you how this grant Part B is funded. It is essentially, once the grant is approved and we enter into a contract, then you will receive 75% of the funds upfront. The 25% that is left behind will be delivered to you upon proof that you've hit your benchmarks, that you've finished your projects, that they are completed, and that you've done so within the contracted term or time frame. And then we will deliver the 25% to you. So in the deliverables and outcomes narrative here, you will essentially answer these questions up here. How are you affecting your population? Make your case basically for your need in this area and what your project will look like when it's completed. Of course, you want to save that and go on to next. Here we are requiring a budget. In this area, a budget narrative, you're going to tell us the story, basically, of how you're going to use the funds. And then you're going to back that up with a spreadsheet in Excel format that you will be required to upload here. And so that we can say, okay, the narrative says this, and their spreadsheet says it's going to cost this much, and so forth. We can see that it those things are congruent. That's also for the reviewers, so that they can see that your proposal is well thought out. You've got your budgets, you've made your estimates, you've got your bids, and so on and so forth, so that that they can make a judgment based on your readiness to perform. And so the budget's very, very important. You will want to be very, very detailed about it. This also informs you and reminds you again about the matching requirement. And this also has the same matching requirement as Part B, or excuse me, as Part A. 10% for 6th class, 20% for 5th class, 30% for 4th class counties, and 40% of third class counties. So essentially, if you're budgeting a request at $200,000 and you're in a 3rd class county, you're going to have to match that $200,000 with an additional 40% of that $200,000. And that will be, you need to include that in your spreadsheet. Also, this asks the question, what is the source of your match? And so we have the list here that comes straight from statute where matching funds can come from. So click a box. It might be even multiple boxes, but it needs to, when it comes back to reimbursement time, you will need to prove that your matching funds came from these sources. All right, you'll want to save that page and go on to the next. This is an agreement, essentially a legal agreement. So you'll read this and agree to those terms and put your signature there. You'll want to save that and go to next. And this last section is called review and status. That's the review and status of your application. If you get a lot of red check marks or red X's, that means that's a field that has not been completed properly or at all. And if you tried to submit the funding application here, you won't be able to. It won't let you. So you're going to have to satisfy the outstanding information by going back into those sections, and you can go into each one of those sections. It'll show you a red X and say, for example, you didn't put in the email address of your secondary contact. You can enter that, save it again, and then come back. Your submit funding application should then become live and you'll be able to submit it. So that's the basics of that. I'm going to stop sharing that. And I will be happy to entertain questions.
Hey James, this is Ryan. Can you hear me okay?
Ryan?
Yeah.
I can barely hear you. Sorry about that.
I'll speak loud. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes, thank you.
So I was in a call earlier with a commissioner, and she asked about Part B and maybe priority of projects to be funded. And so she said, well, are we only going to get funded or considered for funding if we have a big infrastructure project? And my answer was no, that this should be driven by the county, regardless of, how big the project is. If there's a true need, then that's what should be considered. Is that something you would agree with?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, maybe that's a good point that we need to make sure that we emphasize is that this is a competitive pool of funding, $1.75 million against potentially 24 counties. Now, we don't anticipate that all 24 counties will go after the same funds, but imagine that we get 6 proposals or 8 proposals or 10 proposals, and each county is asking for $600,000. You can tell that somebody's not going to get an award. Okay, so that's why these are scored and vetted by an independent review committee. Because essentially, if you divide $600,000 into $1.75 million, only 3 will be awarded. Okay. However, so let me suggest this and emphasize this, frankly. We would love to see smaller projects. In other words, $100,000 here or $50,000 there. So be realistic. It doesn't have to be a massive infrastructure thing. We're still going back to the idea of business expansion and recruitment, training, job creation, and then we're talking about infrastructure to improve business. And in whatever form that is, it doesn't have to be high dollar. So we would, I think, welcome seeing applications that are very realistic in their budget and ask for what they actually need, not for the stars. Okay. In other words, if you have realistically a $100,000 project, then formulate your budget, show us your need and your project, and submit that. We would love to see that smaller rather than all $600,000 projects. I have a question. I'm in Goshen. Is Utah County rural? And in this case, no, it doesn't qualify, unfortunately. Utah County is a second-class county, which and currently we are only determining rural based on county populations. Unfortunately, Utah County does not qualify.
James, this is Dallin with Huber Valley. I apologize if you mentioned this earlier, but looks like the deadline to apply is December 15th. And when did you say that people will know by or hope to know by when they're awarded?
Yeah, so it's an estimated timeline. No, I hadn't introduced that at all. Thank you for reminding me that we need to inform you that the deadline for this application is December 15th. Should have 6 full weeks basically to be able to accomplish this. And we'll close the applications at the end of the day, probably 11:50, 9 p.m. on that day. But we need a couple of weeks to gather all of the information so that the reviewers of the application will be able to do so. And we want to give the reviewers of the application 2 weeks to do so. And anticipating then that by then we will have a suggestion that we could carry forward to the director of Go Utah for final approval. He ultimately gives the final approval. So the committee will refer their suggestions, give their advice as to who should be the award winners on these. And then ultimately he will give the thumbs up. So I'm thinking that by first or second week, no later than the second week of January, we should have answers. Now, remember that these are on 2-year contracts, so we will begin to enter into the contract phase then. That might take a week or 2 to do that, but that these contracts will move forward for up to 2 years. And that probably asks another question. Well, can I get multiple Part Bs? And the answer is yes, but you can't have them simultaneously. So in other words, you can apply and maybe win an award for a Part B grant this year in this fiscal year. But if you are not completed with that Part B grant that came from this fiscal year, the next fiscal year, you will not be qualified to apply for it, another one. So in other words, Your Part B grant, as it is awarded to you in this fiscal year, will need to be completed before you can apply again for another Part B grant. Question is, should we all currently be able to see the Part B option under my applications? Okay, so in that case, the answer should be yes, unless there's some small glitch with your contact information or something like that. In other words, anybody who has applied for Part A should have received, this should be open to you. Now, if this is a case that we need to fix a small glitch, please inform me. I will go to the back end and have our Salesforce administrator make a fix for you. But if you go through this track that we've explained here on the application, accessing the application and so forth, and you can't see it, then we need to fix something. Any other questions? I'm going to anticipate a question because I've had it before. Can we combine these things? In other words, can 2, 3, 4 counties combine all of their applications and go after one project? I can't say that I know perfectly that that is the best way to go about it. Perhaps, however, considering that we have a pool of funds that is limited and that we may have multiple applications and that we may consider the applications from various parts of the state and their needs, the reviewers of the applications will basically put a priority on what they think will, number one, where's the most need? And number two, whether the application is decent and that these folks or this county can perform. I would say you can make that attempt. However, the applicants must be the county. So if we're getting an application from Garfield County, we're going to accept that. But if we're getting an application through other combined forces or a consortium, it will likely not be accepted. It has to come from the county proper. Well, seeing no other questions, let's see, when and where will this recording be available? Thank you, the recording. We are making this a recording and it will be available on our website, right where those links were that access the application and the instructions. It'll probably take a day or two to get that up for us, but that's where you'll find it. Any other questions? Thank you all for being here, participating. Further questions can be delivered directly to me, Eden Johnson, Nan Anderson. Our office in general can address these questions or deliver them to me so that I can communicate with you. Happy to help. Reach out at any time. Again, if there's an access to the application problem, contact me directly and we'll see if we can't fix that right away. Again, I would encourage you to prepare, have all your ducks in a row, and make sure you make your case strong, because these will be scored and judged against each other. So good luck, and thank you for tuning in today. Have a great day.